Knowing how to properly quote the commercial cleaning for factories, warehouses, and any industrial facility can add millions to your business in a very short amount of time. So by the end of this video, you're gonna know 3 major things that you need to know whenever you're quoting a factory that you gotta find out during the walkthrough. And I'm also gonna give you some extra tips at the end. This way you don't need to be intimidated if a large factory calls you or if you wanna go pursue them to grow your business even faster. Because simply put, if you don't know how to quote these, then you're limited in how much your business can grow in the area that you operate. So that's what we're gonna do. Let's tackle what you need to know. Now, first off, this list does come from firsthand experience. My name's Matt. I'm a 7-figure commercial cleaning CEO. And in fact, cleaning industrial facilities for our commercial cleaning company has been the most profitable thing for our company. At the very beginning, we specialized in medical, and we still know how to do medical and still specialize in it, but we can still take on industrial facilities. So let's dive in. All right, so you get a call from a factory or you get the approval to come in and do a quote for them. The first thing that you need to figure out from them is PPE. PPE stands for personal protective equipment. It sounds a lot better on the phone when you're setting the appointment or if you're in a conversation, if you just say what PPE is required for this process. And there's something you can actually do to come across even more expert when asking about PPE, and that has to do with your shoes. They're gonna say you need to wear steel toes, but you can actually clarify that a little bit more and actually to your own comfort in most cases. So it's always good to ask, is it okay to wear steel-toed shoes or are we required to wear steel-toed boots? Different industrial settings have different requirements based on what they're making and the risks that there are in operating in that facility. But every chance that we get, and it's actually most of the time, we're okay wearing simply steel-toed shoes. Steel-toed shoes are just a lot more comfortable to wear and they don't heat you up as fast and they're not as clunky as boots. So if you do go the shoe route, personally, I like to use the Skechers. They're not expensive, they keep your feet cool, they're very simple. The next PPE item that you should go ahead and have on hand for yourself and even for some of your crew members if they're gonna be ready to jump into an industrial setting is a reflective vest. Now you'll wanna ask this industrial prospect if there are any color requirements for those industrial vests. But typically they're going to be happy with just about anything with reflective strips on them. You don't want a neon vest without any sort of reflection. And if you really want to impress your client, you can actually get your logo and your company name put on your own reflective vest. There's all kinds of places online where you can do that. So if you haven't already done that, I'd encourage you to go ahead and do that with your own reflective vest. The next 2 major things are typically the last things that are required for an industrial setting, and that's just going to simply be some earplugs or ear pro as they call it, or some safety glasses or eye pro as they call it. So be sure to go ahead and have your shoes, vest, ears, and eyes on hand. You can ask them if they provide any sort of PPE. Sometimes they'll have slip-on shoes that you can put on almost over any shoe, but they're extremely uncomfortable. That's why you need to have your own. Also, many times they have their own dispensers for ear pro and their own dispensers for eye pro. But again, it just looks so much better if you have your own. Now, the last 2 are good to have on hand just in case, and that's simply some work gloves that are rated for doing any sort of construction work, and also a hard hat if needed. Now, it's going to be very rare that you ever need to have work gloves or a hard hat on site when doing a quote if you're in a typical industrial environment, but sometimes they're doing renovations, sometimes they're operating some very heavy equipment that's carrying things throughout the facility, and someone might be required to wear those extra pieces of PPE. So from the get-go, look like a pro, have your PPE together. If you can put your logo on anything, do it. Now, the next thing we got to figure out once we're on site doing the walkthrough is we have to divide up the facility into its proper parts. And there's 2 main zones that we divide everything up into. And the first zone is going to be the plant or the production area. Then the other is going to be office, administrative area. When it comes to the scope in the plant area, most of the time, you're not going to be asked to clean all the square footage in that facility. Take one of our clients, for example, it's over 1 million square feet. However, we're actually cleaning only about 200,000 of that square feet. And what that really looks like is these facilities prioritize getting the break rooms done, getting the bathrooms done, and any sort of administrative areas within the plant. So we call those plant offices. Those are different than our general offices that are in office buildings. So typically your team is never going to have to go into any sort of rows with machinery or cleaning under machinery or actually cleaning the machinery itself. Their staff, their production team should be doing that. What we're going to be doing and what you're doing is the custodial services, also called janitorial services, in the areas where there's a lot of traffic and it needs to stay sanitized. This can also mean that there's areas like walkways and staircases and railings and wash stations and sinks, and things like that along the way that aren't break rooms, bathrooms, or offices that you'll still need to take care of. But the one reason that you may actually have to go into these deeper production areas would simply be for the trash. Now, if they do request you to actually go deeper into those areas in order to get the trash, the next thing you want to ask them is, are there any sort of signaling procedures that are in place to show that a bin is ready to be taken out? Most of the time, the trash procedure in these areas is going to be one of two things. Either the team that is producing or working the machinery is going to set their bin outside of some line or have some sort of flag on it or some sort of tape that shows, hey, this thing is almost full. Please empty it out as soon as you can. Or the second option is more around rhythmic timing. So they know that at 2 o'clock every day, the custodial crew is supposed to be in that area taking out the trash. And then no matter how full or empty the bins are, they all just get emptied on that pass as your team goes through. So be sure to clarify that. Now, outside of the general scope in the production and plant area of figuring out, which areas are we actually cleaning all the floors on and which ones are we not, of course, bathrooms, break rooms, offices, those kind of things, and what frequencies those are, we also want to confirm our storage areas, because these plants, especially a million or a 2 or 4 million square foot plant, is a lot of ground to cover. So in those, they oftentimes have multiple storage areas throughout the facility, and that's what you want to confirm, is where are the different depots? Where's the main supply depot where you can order all the supplies, or if they order supplies, where are they going to and being dropped off from there? How is your team taking those to the different areas that are smaller storage areas throughout the plant? And then to fully wrap up this difference between the plant areas and the office areas for an industrial client, we need to know what chemicals they like having used in what areas throughout the facility. Now, if you have something that you want to recommend to them, awesome, go for it. But typically, most plants have what they already like and what seems to be working. And we, in our operation, typically don't want to mess with that. We don't want to try to start experimenting at the beginning of a new service. We want to use what's already working and just be consistent at it. So you'll want to clarify what chemicals are being used. Now, obviously, if they're having any sort of floor issues or quality, then maybe that is a chemical problem, and that's where you can suggest something better. But we're always going to start with what they have, ask what it is, ask where they get it. That way, you know where to start from. So that's the plant side of cleaning for an industrial client. Now, what about the office side? There actually are two things that you need to be aware of and know from your client about their offices that's different than other types of industries out there. And here's the first one. Plants have a lot of trainings, a lot of safety trainings, a lot of procedural trainings, and a lot of machining trainings, all kinds of different things that go on in their facility. They are huge on training. And those trainings typically are sponsored by other companies or visitors coming in, and they bring lots of food. So what we need to be aware of is what is their training calendar like and where in their office areas are they doing all these trainings? Because our team is going to need to give special attention before those trainings and after those trainings. So when you're doing an industrial walkthrough and talking with the prospect and you ask them what their training calendar is like, if you can view it and if you can see the areas where trainings are going to happen, and of course ask if there's any complaints in those areas, they're going to see you as a much more detailed option and much more helpful option than other competitors who are just going to walk through and not know anything about the training calendar. The second thing that you want to figure out for their administrative areas is what's called special person visits. Now that's typically what our clients call them. Your industrial facilities out there might call them something else, but essentially a lot of these industrial and manufacturing facilities are bought up by private equity groups and these owners that are billionaires, and it's pretty wild, the industry. But these people will come and visit each and every single facility every once in a while. So don't be surprised if when you start services for a facility like this, you get an email a few weeks later or a month later saying, hey, we have the CEO out of South Africa coming in and they're going to be going to these areas and this area. Please give it a huge tune-up, right? We got to make it look awesome. And it's good to know about this ahead of time if you can during the walkthrough process, how many of these special visits happen each year. It doesn't really matter who it is that's coming. You can ask if you want, but you do want to know which areas typically are the ones where that happens at so that your team already knows ahead of time where they need to focus whenever these people are coming. And that can actually work its way backwards into your price if you need to do that, if it's going to be a very extensive event. We've had multiple times where an industrial facility is willing to pay us lots of extra money on top of the normal cleaning just to prepare for a CEO coming in. Okay, so that's what you need to ask and figure out between the plant cleaning and the actual office administrative side. But there's a whole nother piece to this because now we advance into what's called work loading. Workloading is where we're going to get practical and actually find out how the cleaning is going to happen. Because those break rooms, bathrooms, walkways, and all the stuff that we figured out sometimes are going to happen a lot more than just once a day. If you're getting one of these large industrial facilities, it could happen up to 6 times per day. And honestly, it could be even more than that, but that's the most that I've ever seen in our operation. So what we're going to do is break down which areas need done how often and on which shift do each of these items need to happen and how often. So oftentimes in these industrial facilities, there's a main break room, and then there's a bunch of other smaller break rooms throughout the facility, but there's these hubs throughout it. And that one central hub, the restrooms and the break room and any offices in that area might need cleaned a lot more often than the rest of those. So for example, we have this one client, they call it the communication hallway. It's where everything happens, right? And the break room will need cleaned, for example, 4 times per day. Whereas the other break rooms and bathrooms throughout the facility only need cleaned twice a day. And what we do with workloading is figure out not just how frequently it needs cleaned, but when each cleaning needs to happen and who on the team needs to do it, because many times you're going to have multiple team members throughout the facility through multiple shifts. And that right there is what makes industrial clients so profitable, because they are so large. And all that you have to do is just figure out who needs to do what, where, and when. Now to shortcut this, you can always ask for their workload chart for their custodial team, or if the other company that you would be replacing has one as well that they have provided to the client, because that's something that they like to see. They want to see the plan. Whenever you submit the quote, they want to see cleaner 1 is going to do this. They're going to start here at this time and then go to this, and this. Now, you don't have to be exact with the timings of it. You don't have to say at 7:32 they transition from this task to that task. You can propose that by all means, but you can just do them simply in hour blocks or in 30-minute blocks of an approximation of how someone should be moving through the facility on their shift. And that's simply what work loading is. It's loading up the work, divvying out among the team members in such a way where it's clear, everyone knows their task, because there's a lot going on and your client knows what's happening. Now, if you get an industrial quote request like this and you're not sure how to handle it, check out the links down below. I help lots of commercial cleaning business owners win accounts just like this. I've had many that came to me after trying to win it and they didn't work with me beforehand, and they were like, Matt, if only I'd known what I know now, I wouldn't have lost out on that $20,000 per month account and they would have won it. Now, we have follow-up procedures and things we can do to go back and win them, but if you have any questions, check out the links down below. Now, there is another subject that does tend to come up with workloading that isn't typically specific to workloading, but it triggers this conversation, and that is there's usually a beloved employee that they do not want to lose. And oftentimes that's the reason they haven't canceled their current service, is because there's one of their employees that service has on site that everyone has bonded to, and they talk and they have good relationships. And this is where you can choose how to approach a situation. We like to offer that person to keep their job. We find out what they're getting paid, we find out what they're doing, we find out, any of the relationship stuff that we need to know, and we will work with the person that could potentially lose their job. Now, what's funny is most of the time they're not going to stick around. I wouldn't expect them to stick around. Sometimes they will, but just be ready to replace them if needed. And that brings up a unique factor about cleaning for industrial facilities and an advantage to it as opposed to a lot of other facility types. And that is that because your employees can develop such tight relationships with their employees, they are a lot stickier as clients. So keep that in your back pocket about factories and plants and warehouses and industrial. Now, PPE, the office versus plant cleaning, and the workloading are those 3 major things you got to work through. But here's some extra things that you need to keep in mind, or that you can look more professional about whenever you approach these situations. I call these our key checks, and the first one is, where are the approved wastewater disposal sites? And this is important to clarify, because not all storage throughout a 4 million square foot facility is going to have a mop sink in it where you can just dump out dirty mop water. And this is a very important thing to identify now, because we've had scenarios where an employee would have to walk hundreds of yards throughout a facility to just change their mop water. That adds so much time and therefore cost to you, and that needs to go into the quote. But what you can do to help navigate this is identify if there's any other disposal sites where it can be dumped down a drain in the floor, or if there's any sort of, like I've seen where we use showers. They have one shower in an area where there's other showers, but they know that this one's never used. They mark it off, and it's one of our disposal sites as well. And then in other situations, the client actually provides a truck that they have on site. Now, the truck may not be a really fantastic truck, but it's useful for carrying mop water and extra mop water, or taking it to quickly dump it and come back. There's multiple things that can be figured out. Next, you want to clarify their MSDS procedure. That's material safety data sheets. Typically, they're going to require every single chemical that is used in their facility to have an MSDS on file. And if you've already asked them what chemicals are being used in their facility, especially in the plant area, those are already on their approved MSDS list. It can be a pain sometimes, depending on the bureaucracy in the organization, the size of it, to get a new one approved for them. But you can always ask, what's that process like to get new chemicals added to their approved MSDS list? Next is, what are the pieces of equipment or machines that are already on site, and what is the state of those machines or pieces of equipment? Like I said before, we have a client who already had a truck that was designated for the custodial team on site that they already owned, and it just goes to whoever is doing the cleaning. But then after starting services, we found out the truck didn't even work, so it had to have a bunch of maintenance, and our team was having to do all that relaying with the mop water. So you want to know this ahead of time as you're planning. Also, too, a lot of times these large industrial facilities already own their own floor machines, so you don't have to go buy a $50,000 ride-along to be able to clean their floors. Most of the time, they have something that already works. But again, be sure that you understand how much life is left in this thing, what maintenance is going to go on with it, who's required, or who needs called for maintenance to be done on it. That's questions you got to clarify with your client. And that leads into another important question regarding maintenance, is what typically happens in the facility that your team should be looking out for to report. These buildings are so massive that it's hard for your team to be focused on everything around them while they're trying to do their job in the middle of a 1 million square foot plant. So what are some of the things that the maintenance team comes across and that they really want us to be acutely attentive for? Now, of course, if we see something, we should report it to maintenance, but we've had clients where there's flooding in certain areas that happens, so we need to know, like, hey, we got to report this right away, or to be looking out for it at certain times of the day or certain times of the year, things like that. Now, here's a couple unique ones when it comes to staffing for these industrial facilities, and that is, what is their onboarding program like? Because many times they have some sort of OSHA safety training that's already pre-approved with their logo on it, that every single person, even if they're a vendor, they have to complete it before being able or approved to work on site at their facility. So you want to know, what does that process look like? Do we have to check in with security? Is there someone there that has the training log and they give it to them and they go through some sort of test? Like, what does it look like to get someone approved to work inside of their facility? Also, is there a way for us to do that in our office? Can we have the training program? Can they complete it online? Does it have to be a hard flip book? Typically it is. It's some PowerPoint slides. They print it out and they make you go through it and you fill out a test and security checks it off. That's what we've seen most of the time here in our area, but just be sure to clarify, what does that look like to get the approval for any staff to come on site? And what that leads to next is, what is their badging procedure? What that means is, typically there's some sort of badge that everyone gets. Sometimes it has their photo on it. Sometimes it just has the company logo and their name on it. But it's going to be a card that they scan at different access points in the facility to get into certain areas. And then if there's any sort of issue accessing areas, who do we go to? It's typically security, once again, that can open up certain areas of the facility for certain badge numbers. And a quick tip when it comes to badges, something you can expect if you haven't cleaned industrial facilities before, is that if you do have turnover, you got to turn those badges back in, or notify somebody that that person no longer works there. That way they can deactivate that badge. Your client will come to you very upset if you have a lot of badges that have been made, none of them have been turned in, and none of them have been deactivated. Look, those are the three main things, and then some extra key points that you need to know whenever you're going to go in and quote these industrial facilities like warehouses, factories, plants, any type of setting that's like that. And if you want even more confidence to price them properly and to get into the actual details of workloading and how to practically make this thing work, then feel free to check the links down below where I can help you do just that. Also, if you want to have more help on how to go about quoting and pricing and an actual formula and get a calculator to do that, go watch this video right here. That's where I walk through that entire process for you so that you can win facilities just like this. Again, my name is Matt, your 7-figure commercial cleaning CEO. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to like and subscribe. Until next time, keep building.